You've gone silent, no texts, no calls, no chasing, and now there's a part of you wondering, is it even working? Let me tell you something powerful. Silence is not empty. It's full of answers. It's full of energy that begins to shift the dynamic between you and him and within you. At first, he may not understand your silence. He's used to your attention. He's used to the comfort of knowing you'll always be there, replying, reassuring, reaching out. But the moment you stop doing that, something begins to change. Day by day, your absence starts to speak louder than your words ever did. He starts to feel it, the stillness, the uncertainty, the gap that your energy once filled. At first, he might convince himself that he's fine, that he's got it all under control. But as time passes, curiosity begins to take over. Why hasn't she reached out? Has she moved on? Or was I wrong about her feelings? That's when the mind starts to wander and emotions start to stir. The truth is, no contact isn't about him at all. It's about you. It's about reclaiming your peace, your focus, and your self-worth. You're breaking the habit of emotional dependence. That cycle where you measure your value based on someone else's attention. You're not waiting for him to notice you, you're rediscovering you. When you stop chasing, you create space, and that space is where transformation happens. It's where your confidence rebuilds, your energy realigns, and your standards rise. You start to see that love isn't about proving your worth to someone who couldn't see it before. It's about protecting your heart until someone truly deserves it. So yes, he's thinking about you. He's wondering what happened. He's trying to figure out why your silence feels heavier than any conversation you've ever had. But that's not the point anymore. The real power of no contact is that by the time he figures it out, you've already moved beyond needing his validation. Because when you rise in silence, you don't just get stronger, you become unforgettable. There's a moment that comes after you finally decide to go silent. After you stop reaching out, stop explaining, stop trying to make someone understand your worth. At first, it feels strange, even uncomfortable. You're so used to giving, to being available, to filling the space with words, reassurance, and effort. But when you pull back, when you go silent, something begins to shift in a way that words could never accomplish. Silence creates curiosity. It becomes the most powerful message you could ever send without saying a single thing. Because in that silence, he begins to feel what it's like not to have access to you anymore. Not to your attention, not to your care, not to your energy. You see, people grow accustomed to what is constant. When you were always there, replying quickly, checking in, keeping the connection alive, he never had to question your place in his world. You made it easy for him to feel secure, maybe even too easy. But when you step back and remove that energy, when your presence suddenly becomes a mystery, that's when the mind starts to wander. He starts thinking, why did she stop reaching out? Did she lose interest? Is she seeing someone else? That's curiosity at work. And curiosity is the first seed of realization, because it forces him to confront the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he took you for granted. Your silence begins to echo in his world. The messages he used to ignore suddenly feel like something he wishes he could receive again. The sound of your laughter, the way you used to care, all of it starts to replay in his mind, but this time with a different meaning. That's what happens when silence enters the picture. It turns comfort into uncertainty. It turns confidence into doubt. But more importantly, silence changes you. When you stop reaching out, you start reaching within. You begin to notice how much energy you used to give away, how much of yourself you invested in being understood, in being chosen. And you start to realize you don't need to chase what's not choosing you. Silence gives you back your power. It teaches you that your value doesn't depend on who notices you, but on how deeply you know your own worth. The more you stay silent, the more you shift the focus from him to you. The more you begin to heal, to rebuild, to glow differently. And that's the part he feels the most, the shift in your energy, the calm confidence that comes when you're no longer desperate for a response. The peace that replaces anxiety. The quiet strength that says, I'm not waiting anymore. So when you choose silence, remember you're not losing connection, you're gaining clarity. You're not punishing him, you're protecting yourself, and your silence will do what your words never could. Make him see your absence, feel your worth, and realize what he's lost. Because silence when used with self-respect, becomes the loudest statement of all. There comes a point after no contact begins when something deep inside you starts to shift. At first, you may not even notice it. You're still thinking about him, still wondering what he's doing, still fighting the urge to reach out. But slowly, quietly, something changes. Your focus begins to turn inward. What once felt like a painful void starts to feel like space, and that space becomes sacred. That is the energy shift. When you were caught up in the connection, your energy flowed toward him. You were always giving your time, your thoughts, your emotions, your attention. You may not have realized it, but you were pouring your power into someone else, constantly seeking reassurance that you mattered. Every message you sent, every time you tried to explain your side, every time you worried about how he felt, you were giving pieces of your energy away. But the moment you stop, the moment you go quiet, all that energy starts to come back to you. It doesn't vanish, it redirects. You begin to feel your own strength again. The anxiety that once came from waiting for a reply starts to dissolve, and you find yourself breathing easier. You start doing things for yourself, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you finally have the space to remember who you are outside of that relationship. This is the beauty of the energy shift. It's invisible, but undeniable. He feels it too, even if he doesn't understand why. Suddenly, the dynamic that once gave him comfort begins to feel uncertain. He used to feel in control, knowing that you cared more, that you'd always be there. But now, the energy has changed. He can sense it. The calm in your silence, the confidence in your absence, the peace that doesn't need his validation. It's a strange thing for him because he's no longer feeding off your attention. He starts to wonder why he feels a pull toward you again. It's not because you're doing anything. It's because you've stopped. You've broken the energetic pattern that once made him comfortable. And in doing so, you've taken your power back. You see, energy speaks louder than words ever could. When your energy is desperate, it pushes people away. When it's centered and calm, it draws them in. And when you're at peace, people can feel that without you having to prove anything. That's what makes no contact so powerful. It changes the energetic balance completely. You're no longer chasing, convincing, or waiting. You're simply existing in your strength, and that shift changes everything. It's no longer about whether he comes back. It's about whether you even want him to. Because the more you stay in your own energy, the more you realize how powerful, capable, and complete you already are. The energy shift is where you stop losing yourself in someone else and start finding yourself again. And once that happens, nothing and no one can take your power from you ever again. There comes a moment in every heartbreak, every silence, every space after someone walks away, when you realize that what you're really fighting for isn't them, it's you. It's the part of you that forgot your value while trying to prove it. It's the version of you that kept giving, hoping that love would be enough to make someone see your worth. But when you finally stop chasing, when you finally go silent, you begin to reclaim something far more important than their attention, your self-worth. At first, it doesn't feel empowering. It feels like loss. It feels like rejection. It feels like emptiness. You miss them. You replay conversations in your head. You question whether you did something wrong, whether you could have done more. But this is the breaking point, the place where you either continue giving away your power or decide to take it back. Reclaiming your self-worth begins the moment you stop trying to convince someone to value you. It begins when you stop explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. It begins when you remind yourself that your worth isn't measured by how much someone else chooses you, but by how deeply you choose yourself. You start realizing that love is not meant to be begged for, and attention is not proof of value. You begin to see that peace is more attractive than chaos, and self-respect is more magnetic than desperation. When you stop fighting for someone who won't meet you halfway, you create room for your strength to rise again. Day by day, you begin to rebuild. You start doing things that make you feel alive again, not to distract yourself, but to reconnect with who you were before you gave too much. You remember your interests, your dreams, your passions. You start to treat yourself with the same care you once gave away so freely. That's the quiet magic of healing. It reminds you that your love was never the problem, it was just given to the wrong place. The person who walked away may start to feel your shift. They'll notice the calm, the confidence, the lightness in your energy. But this time, it's different because your worth is no longer up for negotiation. You no longer need them to notice, to text, to validate. You've realized that your silence isn't a punishment, it's protection. It's how you draw the line between who deserves your heart and who doesn't. And as you stand in that silence, you feel a power that words can't describe. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you don't need to chase love to have it. Because love, the kind that lasts, begins with you. Reclaiming your self-worth isn't about getting them back. It's about getting you back, the confident, grounded, radiant version of yourself that knows she was always enough. And once you remember that, you stop waiting for someone to come back because you've already come home to yourself. There's a stage after you've gone silent, after the constant thoughts, the waiting, the wondering, where everything begins to quiet down inside you. The chaos that once lived in your mind starts to lose its grip. The emotional waves that kept crashing finally begin to settle. That's when the emotional reset begins. At first, it doesn't happen smoothly. You might wake up some mornings missing him so intensely that you almost break the silence. Other days, you'll feel nothing but strength and clarity. Healing rarely moves in a straight line, but somewhere between those ups and downs, something beautiful starts to shift. You begin to detach emotionally, not because you stopped caring, but because you've started understanding. An emotional reset is not about forgetting someone. It's about releasing the version of yourself that existed in that story. It's about letting go of the emotional habits that kept you tied to pain. The constant overthinking, the need for closure, the belief that love must always hurt a little. When you reset emotionally, you reclaim your power from everything that used to control your peace. You begin to see things for what they are, not for what you wish they were. You stop reading between lines, stop chasing mixed signals. Stop making excuses for behavior that never matched your effort. You start accepting reality, not as a punishment, but as freedom. Because once you accept the truth, you stop fighting against it. In this phase, silence becomes your therapy. You start to realize that you don't need to text to feel better. You don't need a response to find closure. You begin to find comfort in your own presence, in your routines, in your solitude, in the peace that comes when you're no longer waiting for someone else to make you feel okay. You might notice small things changing. The song that used to hurt doesn't sting as much. The memories fade into lessons instead of wounds. You stop checking if he's watching your stories, and you stop wondering if he misses you. That's not coldness, that's healing. That's emotional maturity taking root. The emotional reset is your heart learning to breathe again without depending on anyone else for oxygen. It's the moment you start to feel light because you've finally stopped carrying the weight of what you can't control. You begin to pour your energy back into yourself, your goals, your health, your joy. And soon, the same silence that once felt unbearable begins to feel peaceful, even empowering. You start to see that love isn't meant to drain you, it's meant to grow you. And sometimes, the most powerful kind of love is the love you give yourself when you stop chasing what isn't meant for you. That's what the emotional reset truly is. A return to balance, to peace, to clarity. It's the moment your heart stops asking, why me? And starts saying, thank you for the lesson, for the growth, and for the chance to begin again. There's a certain kind of transformation that can only happen when you step away. When you stop explaining, stop reaching out, and stop trying to be understood. At first, the distance feels heavy. It feels like something is missing, like you've left a part of yourself behind. But as the days pass, that same distance that once felt like emptiness begins to turn into something powerful. It becomes the space where you finally meet yourself again. Distance gives you perspective. When you're too close to something, especially someone, your emotions can blur the truth. You see the potential, not the pattern. You remember the good moments, but overlook the pain that followed them. But the moment you step back, you start to see clearly. You begin to notice things you once ignored. How much effort you gave, how little you received in return. and how long you stayed hoping something would change. That clarity doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from distance. Transformation through distance is not about forgetting the person, it's about remembering yourself. You begin to reclaim the energy you once poured into holding someone else together and start using it to rebuild yourself. You rediscover the passions that once made you feel alive, the goals that got lost somewhere in the middle of that relationship, and the strength you didn't even know you had. With time, your mind becomes lighter. You stop checking your phone every few minutes. You stop rehearsing what you would say if he came back. Instead, you start waking up with a sense of calm, knowing you're finally choosing yourself. The distance that once felt like punishment now feels like peace. It becomes your safe space, a place where you grow, heal, and begin to thrive again. And while you're changing, he begins to notice. He may not understand what's happening, but he can feel it. The shift in your energy, the silence that once felt temporary now carries power. He starts to realize that you're no longer emotionally available in the same way. The control he once felt begins to fade because you've taken your power back without saying a word. That's the quiet strength that distance brings. It changes the balance completely. What's most beautiful about transformation through distance is that it doesn't just change how you see him. It changes how you see yourself. You no longer see yourself as someone waiting to be chosen. You see yourself as someone who is already complete. You no longer measure your worth through someone else's attention, you measure it through your own peace. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the distance didn't break you, it built you. It turned pain into wisdom, confusion into clarity, and attachment into freedom. It taught you that real strength doesn't come from holding on, but from letting go with grace. That's the power of transformation through distance. It's the quiet rebirth of the person you were always meant to become. There comes a time, often long after the silence has settled, when he finally begins to notice the change. At first, he doesn't see it. He assumes it's temporary, that you're just trying to prove a point, that you'll eventually come back, that your quiet is only another phase in the pattern he grew so comfortable with. But what he doesn't understand is that you've changed, you've evolved. And by the time he realizes it, it's already too late. He'll scroll through your photos, revisit old messages, or catch a glimpse of your name somewhere, and it'll hit him differently this time. There's something about your energy that feels unfamiliar. You look calm, you sound lighter. There's no trace of the emotional storm he left behind. And in that moment, curiosity turns into confusion, and confusion turns into regret, because now he's starting to understand what your silence really meant. You weren't trying to manipulate him. You weren't playing games. You were healing. You were rebuilding yourself from the inside out, slowly, quietly, powerfully. The person he once knew no longer exists in the same form. You've stopped reacting, stopped explaining, stopped waiting for someone to choose you. You've built a new version of yourself, one grounded in peace, not approval. He'll remember how easy it used to be to get your attention, how a single message could pull you back in. But now, that power is gone. You no longer respond to the same triggers. The words that used to weaken you now sound empty. The moments that once made your heart race now feel like lessons. You've outgrown the old cycle, and he can feel that. That's the thing about growth. It's silent, but it's undeniable. The energy you carry now speaks louder than anything you could say. You don't have to prove that you've moved on. He feels it. He senses it in the way you no longer chase, in the calmness of your absence, in the strength that radiates from your stillness. And that realization hits hard, because when you evolve, you shift the entire story. He begins to realize that while he stayed the same, you didn't. He may even try to come back, hoping to reconnect with the version of you he once knew. But she's gone. She doesn't live here anymore. The woman he took for granted has turned into someone who knows her worth so deeply that she no longer entertains anything less than what she deserves. And the truth is, your evolution isn't meant to make him regret losing you. It's meant to set you free, because you no longer need him to understand your value. You no longer crave his validation or attention. You've already found what you were looking for within yourself. By the time he realizes you've evolved, you're already standing in your power, unbothered, graceful, and whole. You've become the woman who no longer needs to be chosen because she's already chosen herself. There comes a moment after all the pain, all the silence, and all the self-doubt when you finally see what this entire journey was really about. It was never about him. It was always about you, about who you become when you stop chasing what isn't chasing you, about how strong you grow when you stop giving your energy to things that drain your spirit, about the person you discover beneath all the noise, all the waiting, and all the heartbreak. The truth is, no contact was never a strategy to make him miss you. It was the doorway to your transformation. It was how you reclaimed your peace, how you reset your emotions, how you learned to love yourself again. Because through the silence, you didn't just pull away from him. You pulled yourself out of the cycle of pain that kept you small. You learned that your worth isn't proven by who texts you back, but by how you rise when no one does. And now you've reached that moment of quiet power where you don't need to explain, chase, or prove anything. The energy has shifted. You've evolved. You've taken your focus off of what you lost and placed it on what you've gained: wisdom, strength, clarity, and confidence. You've become the kind of person who no longer settles for half love because you've learned what it means to be whole on your own. One day he'll realize it. He'll see the glow that comes from peace, not from attention. He'll remember how you used to give endlessly and how now you give only to yourself, with grace, with power, with intention. And in that moment, he'll understand what he lost. But by then, you'll already be far beyond needing him too. Because healing isn't about winning someone back. It's about winning yourself back. It's about walking away from what doesn't serve you and stepping into the life you were meant to live, confident, grounded, and free. The silence that once felt unbearable has become your strength. The distance that once hurt has become your healing. The loss that once broke you has become your rebirth. So stand tall in your peace. Smile at how far you've come. You are not the same person who once begged to be seen. You are the woman who now knows her worth without needing anyone to confirm it. And that is the moment you truly win. Because when you evolve beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond need, nothing and no one can ever take your power again. You didn't lose him. You found you. And that is the greatest victory of all.